Hi, welcome to Paranormal Response. My name is Sarah.
And I'm Christy.
And we have a special guest.
Jim Tierney here. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good to have you.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, I really want to thank you for inviting me in. And I've got a whole array of what we call, and I've created, is legacy stones. So I started getting involved in ancient mysticism and symbology. And I think about 1991 or so, decided that I would, pursue it and put it together, make it a project. So I had a few stones going. I call them legacy stones. Real quick overview. This is like one of my very first ones. We've got the stone itself, the symbol, and then on the back, besides a little, hanging fixture, I tried to paraphrase some of the history, some of the meaning, and some of them that are actually archaeologically tight. I've had them dated with the dig, maybe the cave, or the, where it was particularly found. And some of it was kind of hard to take some vast cosmologies and paraphrase them into a paragraph.
Right.
Paragraph paraphrasing. And I did sort of slant towards when you get into ancient tribal symbols and mythic lore, a lot of the cosmologies filter down into parallel stories. As time went along, a lot of the stories were enculturated and changed. For example, a lot of the matriarchal myths was slowly, the male essence was brought into it, and then the female was pushed out, and then all we're left with was the patriarchal aspect of it. So a lot of the symbols were originally a matriarchal, maybe goddess of fertility or some sort of astro-theological expression, and ended up to be, worn by generals in warfare, 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. Wow. So the original symbol of what its meaning was borrowed, handed down, changed, and it changed as we went along. So I did bring some in here, but one of the original symbols that I'd like to speak about was the yin and yang symbol, and that one we'll start with because it's fairly recognizable. I mean, even on a corporate level, people, will use that yin and yang symbol. And the way I was first exposed to that was, when I was a teenager in martial arts, because that symbol is in, it's actually a symbol for Tai Chi Chuan, and it's a Chinese symbol that they incorporate into the martial arts. And the martial arts has a lot of polarity to it. For instance, to learn how to be fast, you have to be completely relaxed. So speed comes with stillness, and there's a plethora of those examples like that. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting symbol, and I like the symbol. The yin and yang symbol, I think we have a photo of it, is originally from Chinese shamanism. It was depicted as a black and a white fish. So you could see the eyes and the fish, and they were chasing each other's tails, which is, we'll get back to that in a minute, but I'd like to explain what the symbol means in its essence. Most people would take the yin and yang to mean, it represents opposites.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Which is a lot of...
It's more harmony, kind of.
It's getting closer.
Okay.
Actually, what we have with the yin and yang is it exposes the illusion of dualism, where opposites have a conspiracy of commingling and cooperation. For instance, up and down are opposites, but without the other one, it wouldn't exist. Mm-hmm. So they have a tacit conspiracy behind the scenes. So black and white are not opposites. Black wouldn't exist without white. They're just varying degrees on the spectrum of commonality. So black and white actually have commonality. They're not opposites. It would be the same thing with, let's say you had an enemy. Let's say you had an enemy, right? You're fighting with that enemy. Well, you're opposite of the enemy. Well, in reality, you're both battling over a common element. Where it's been said a tiger can't have a battle with a shark because there's no common field. So the common field of the yin and yang expresses that the opposites are actually in cahoots, and they're actually supporting and giving rise to each other. So that was a nice symbol. And
a lot of times we always think in terms of, and I'm not necessarily like condoning this, but we think in the terms of, I know Sarah and I and our team necessarily good and bad, good and evil. I mean, and what's the, wow, that was
I have a whole lot of neutral, though.
Well, we have a scale of that, and whether it means anything to anybody else, but there can't be good without bad.
exactly,
In our own language.
exactly. You wouldn't know the difference from one without the other.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, that makes sense.
well, actually, what they call it is emergent. If something has an emergent quality, would be like white light, really doesn't exist. It has an emergent quality when there's a harmony of colors. So when the harmony of color frequencies happen, it emerges as white. So duality has an emergent quality because behind the scenes, the opposites are working together. So the illusion is emergent, but in reality, good needs evil, or black needs white, or
Yeah.
sometimes
Because if you don't have something to compare it to.
you're lost, right? Yeah, and it's a point of reference there, because if I take a pen and I drop it, of course, this thing falls down. Well, if we're on the other side of the world, that same direction is up. So see how you can get lost with that real quick
Yeah.
without that grounding of the illusion of opposites. So that's the yin and yang. And very parallel, there's a lot of Eastern notions that are accepted in the West that are not exactly true to the teaching. So the yin and yang symbol doesn't represent opposites, it actually represents harmony and union, like you had mentioned before, underneath it. It's kind of it's kind of tacit, as it were. Here's one some people might recognize too, and this is the Om symbol.
Oh, yeah.
Now this one actually isn't a symbol, and it's not really a letter nor a word. It's what they would call like a pictograph, where the sound of Om is like a cosmic octave where the universe sings itself into expression. And the subatomic particle physicists could tell you all about that. Oh, there we go. So which one we got? There we go.
Yeah, it's hard to figure it out.
I know, because we're going backwards. So here's the Om. So what we have is this. Om is the sound of where there's silence and the void, into where the universe expresses itself into waves. So you can see how this is actually a picture. This would be like the cosmic void of singularity or nothingness, and then the breach where the infinite changes into finite expression. And it's used in meditation to Om.
Yeah.
So it's like the sound, they would recognize it as the sound of God, or the sound of the universe's pulse.
It's really
That's that one.
By the way, how do you make these?
Actually, what I do with these is, I like that question. People don't usually ask me that. They just think they just come about by themselves.
You mean they don't?
Yeah.
Not fun. Well, like, for instance, this one. This one, if I took this one, I would take
That's
this
cool.
original symbol design or whatever, and I would sketch it by hand on paper, and then I lay it down. Then I take the paper and lay it down on thrower's clay, and then what I do is carve out the negative.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Like a relief.
What I do it in reverse, because then what I do is then I coat it with silicone rubber, and then peel the rubber off, and I have a mold.
There you go.
So I have to carve them in reverse, because when you're working with mold, you do a mold of positives and negative. And then once they're pulled out, I actually dye the plaster. You could see on some of these, I'll dye the gypsum plaster, like this one is pink,
Yeah.
and then use coloring. And then when I scrape it, the pink comes up.
Oh,
you know,
nice.
so it comes up that way. Let me see which one we should do next. I know we'll do. Here's a symbol that people might see how symbols get twisted from their original meaning. And this one